He typed a few words, pressed post, and then silence. No more replies, no more logins. Just a digital ghost frozen in time. Imagine scrolling through an old thread one night, only to realize you're staring at the final trace of someone who has vanished without explanation. That last post is all that remains, a handful of letters that have outlived the man behind them. Welcome to Black Thread Mysteries. Here, we explore the chilling stories where reality blurs with the unexplained, and tonight's mystery is one that hides not in abandoned buildings or foggy forests, but in the quiet corridors of the internet itself. The case we're diving into begins on a forum, the kind you might visit without ever thinking twice. For years, people talked, joked, argued, and shared life updates there. Buried among thousands of usernames was a man who seemed ordinary. He laughed with strangers online, exchanged advice, even joined casual debates. To anyone scrolling, he looked like just another voice in the digital crowd. But then came that final post. A post so routine, so unremarkable, that no one paid attention to it at first. No alarm bells rang. No one stopped to wonder if something was wrong. Yet that short message would later gain an eerie weight because it marked the end. After that moment, his account went dark. No replies, no private messages, no footprints anywhere else. He simply dissolved into the shadows. At first, no one noticed. On the internet, people disappear all the time. Delete accounts, lose interest, start fresh under new usernames. But weeks passed, then months. And when curious forum members scrolled back through the archives, they realized this was no ordinary vanishing act. The man's absence wasn't casual. It was total. Almost as if someone had pulled the plug on his life overnight. What happened to him? Was it foul play, an accident, or a deliberate choice? Say to vanish. Or is it possible that his final post wasn't just casual conversation, but a subtle cry for help nobody recognized until it was far too late? That's where the haunting begins, because the internet never forgets. But sometimes it remembers things we'd rather not confront. To understand why this disappearance is so unsettling, you have to look at who he was before the silence. On the surface, he was like any one of us, logging in after work, scrolling late at night, typing replies when sleep wouldn't come. Friends described him as witty, curious, sometimes restless. Not a celebrity, not a name that would stand out in headlines. Just a regular person tucked away in the endless noise of the web. And that's exactly what makes this case so haunting. He wasn't broadcasting a farewell speech. He wasn't hinting at a dramatic exit. His final comment wasn't filled with secrets or confessions. It was small talk. The sort of thing you might read, skip, and forget within seconds. But after that, there was nothing. His inbox stayed unanswered. His profile stayed frozen. The man himself never surfaced again. The internet has a strange way of turning ordinary moments into monuments. Over time, that last post became something far bigger than it was ever meant to be. New visitors stumbled across it and began asking questions. Old friends from the forum started to worry. Why hasn't he come back? Has anyone heard from him? Does anyone know his real name? That curiosity only deepened as months stretched into years. Attempts to track him down hit dead ends. No forwarding usernames, no activity on related platforms. It was as though he had stepped through a digital door and locked it forever behind him. And the eerie part is this. In the real world, no official report of his disappearance exists. No police file, no newspaper article, nothing to suggest he was ever declared missing. Which leaves only two possibilities. Either something happened to him that night which erased his presence from both the real and digital world, or he made the choice to vanish deliberately, leaving behind that last ordinary comment as a kind of final echo. For those who knew him online, that's the detail that refuses to fade. His exit wasn't dramatic. It was invisible. And that makes it even more terrifying. Because if someone can vanish so completely without warning, without trace, then maybe it could happen to anyone. Even us. Even you. The timeline of his vanishing begins on an unremarkable evening. He had been active across several threads, replying casually, nothing out of the ordinary. Then came the post. the one now immortalized by endless speculation. A simple comment, brief and almost meaningless at first glance. But that was it. After pressing enter, he was never seen online again. Users thought nothing of it at first. People drift away from forums all the time. Accounts go silent. But this was different. In the days following, his usual late-night activity simply stopped. No replies, no logins. His presence flickered out instantly, like a candle snuffed in an empty room. At first, friends joked about it. Maybe he finally touched grass. Maybe he met someone. Maybe he just got bored. But as weeks turned into months, the jokes gave way to unease. Some began searching for clues buried in his past posts. They looked for hints of depression, hidden cries for help, or evidence that he had planned to leave. But the archives showed nothing unusual. He had been as normal, as unassuming as anyone else. That's when theories began to spread. Some suggested he was the victim of a crime, perhaps snatched while heading out late, his absence hidden behind the anonymity of the internet. Others whispered darker possibilities, that he had discovered something, written something, or seen something he shouldn't have. In those corners of the web where rumors breed, the story evolved into something almost mythic. A chilling realization soon struck many. Without knowing his real name, there was no way to confirm if he was alive or dead. He was trapped in the limbo of digital memory, reduced to nothing but a username and one final post. And for the internet, that uncertainty was more frightening than any clear answer. It's here that the story blurs into obsession. Forum members who had once laughed at his silence now found themselves digging through search engines, trying combinations of his username, hoping it would link to another platform, another clue. Each dead end only added to the mystery. Was he alive and living under a new identity, watching all of this unfold from a distance? Or had his story ended the same night he pressed enter on that last post? The unsettling truth is this. In the digital age, disappearance doesn't always mean being found in police databases or news articles. Sometimes, vanishing can be as simple as closing a browser and never logging back in. And for him, that one decision, whether forced or chosen, turned his life into an unsolved riddle still echoing years later. As the years passed, the unanswered questions around his disappearance hardened into legend. On the forum where he had once been so active, his name became a kind of ghostly presence. New users stumbled upon his final comment and felt a strange chill. The words themselves were harmless, but knowing they were his last created an eerie weight. Imagine posting something that turns into your final trace, one user wrote years later. No one knew it at the time, but that line is all he left behind. The comment sections began to spiral with theories, some rational, others spiraling into the bizarre. It wasn't just about where he went, it was about what his silence symbolized. In the digital age, people leave behind trails, social media updates, phone signals, financial transactions. Yet here was a man who seemed to dissolve completely, with no official missing persons report, no obituary, no trace of life or death. That impossible silence fed the darkest suspicions. Some believed he was the victim of an accident, perhaps struck down suddenly with no way for his online circle to ever find out. Others suggested foul play, pointing out how easy it is for someone to vanish without notice if their offline and online lives are completely separated. Then came the more unsettling theories that his disappearance wasn't just physical, but intentional, that he chose to erase himself, to walk away from the digital world forever. This possibility sparked its own set of questions. Why would someone choose to vanish so completely? Was he escaping something or someone? Did he owe debts, carry secrets, or fear something lurking in his offline life? To those who had followed his posts, nothing suggested such turmoil. But the idea that anyone could disappear at will unsettled them deeply. And still, the internet did what it always does. It obsessed. His username was dragged into every mystery thread, every unresolved disappearance. Some began weaving connections between his silence and unrelated vanishings, insisting it was part of something larger, something hidden. The chilling part. Despite all the theories, not a single confirmed clue ever surfaced. No relatives came forward, no law enforcement mentions, nothing to confirm or deny. Just that one line of text, sitting in digital stone, becoming more haunting with every passing year. In the end, the case stopped being just about one man. It became a mirror held up to all of us, a reminder of how fragile our existence really is online. Because if someone could disappear so fully, without a trace, without a word, then maybe our digital lives aren't as permanent as we like to believe. By now, the story had outgrown the quiet corner of the forum where it began. Threads about him started appearing on other platforms, Reddit, Quora, YouTube comment sections. Strangers who had never known him were suddenly piecing together theories, linking his disappearance to everything from secret experiments to internet folklore. What began as a mystery of one vanished user had transformed into a cultural ghost story of the digital age. People were fascinated by how ordinary the final post was. It didn't read like a goodbye. There were no hidden codes, no strange grammar, nothing to suggest a cry for help. It was the very normality of the message that made it so disturbing. One user compared it to a photograph of someone smiling just before disaster strikes, a snapshot that looks harmless until you know what came after. And the ripple effect grew. The forum, once lively with conversation, became overshadowed by this lingering question. Old threads were dug up, every word he had ever written dissected for possible meaning. But no answers emerged, just the same silence. In time, urban legends grew around his name. Some swore they saw him reappear under a different username, only for that account to vanish too. Others claimed he had been the victim of a targeted attack, caught in something far bigger than himself. But as always, nothing could be proven. His digital footprint ended the night of that final post, and nothing since has confirmed his fate. It's in this uncertainty that the story became powerful. The mystery wasn't just about him, it was about the fragile nature of identity online. Who are we really, when reduced to a string of characters and a profile picture? How much of us survives if the connection goes dark and the username goes silent? Perhaps that's why his disappearance still resonates today. In a world where most of us assume the internet will remember us forever, his case proves the opposite. It shows how quickly someone can vanish, how a presence once so constant can be erased without a trace, leaving only speculation in its wake. And for those who still stumble across his last post, the feeling is the same. A chill, a sense of unfinished business, a reminder that behind every comment lies a real life, and sometimes a story that ends without explanation. The deeper people searched, the more unsettling the silence became. Every corner of the internet seemed to echo the same absence. His username, once active, now stood like a gravestone no one could touch. And yet, something about the mystery refused to fade. It drew people in, tempting them to dig further, to spend hours chasing shadows in archives and cached pages. At this point, the story became less about fact and more about obsession. Communities began to form around the unanswered questions, treating his disappearance like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Timelines were constructed. Old screenshots were preserved as evidence. Some even reached out to law enforcement, hoping there might be a record of a missing person that could be tied to his digital ghost. But nothing ever came back. And that's where the eeriness grows sharper. Because how can someone vanish so completely that not even the faintest real-world trace remains? In the age of data trails, of constant surveillance, his absence feels like an impossibility, unless, of course, it was deliberate. Some theorists began to argue exactly that. They suggested he wasn't a victim at all, that he chose to walk away, abandoning not just the forum, but his entire identity. To them, that final comment wasn't meaningless. It was a curtain drop, the digital equivalent of fading into the background and never returning. Others, however, believed something darker was at play, an unseen danger that silenced him before anyone could react. This is where I want to pull you, the viewer, into the mystery. If you stumbled across that last post, the one final line before someone vanished, what would your first thought be? Would you assume they walked away from the screen forever, or would you sense something more sinister hiding behind the silence? Drop your theory in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. I want to key now how this mystery feels in your corner of the world. Because here's the chilling truth. We may never get an answer. All we're left with is a username frozen in time, a haunting reminder of how fragile our digital lives really are. And maybe, just maybe, that's the scariest part. That the mystery of his disappearance is not only unsolved, but possibly unsolvable. What makes this case even more unnerving is how the digital world remembers and forgets at the same time. His final post is still there, visible to anyone who searches for it, but everything else around it has shifted. Forums have shut down, websites have been archived, entire platforms have evolved into something unrecognizable. Yet that one comment remains like a fossil, perfectly preserved while the world around it decays. And it's that contrast, the permanence of his last words versus the disappearance of his life, that fuels so much speculation. Some say it feels like stumbling across an abandoned house in the middle of a bustling city. The lights of the internet never go out, yet this one window has stayed dark for years. A few digital investigators tried going further. They analyzed metadata, timestamps, even the patterns of his online activity. They looked for overlaps with other usernames, similar writing styles, anything that could suggest he resurfaced elsewhere. But nothing matched. If he continued existing online, he had reinvented himself so completely that no one has been able to connect the dots. This failure only added to the myth, because if he truly managed to vanish in the age of near-total surveillance, where data trails are almost impossible to erase, then it suggests a level of control most of us don't have. Was he a master at covering his tracks? Or was he helped by something or someone much larger? Others argue the opposite, that his vanishing wasn't careful at all. It was abrupt, messy, the kind of disappearance that comes when something unexpected happens. An accident, a crime, or a sudden decision made in desperation. And if that's the case, then his last post isn't a farewell. It's a fragment, a random echo of a life cut short. But the most haunting idea of all is the possibility that he knew exactly what he was doing. That the act of leaving behind one final ordinary message was intentional, a way to seed confusion and guarantee that his absence would never be forgotten. After all, sometimes the most effective mysteries are the ones created by design. And so the comment remains. A handful of words, harmless on the surface yet chilling when you realize they were his last. The more people read it, the more it seems to take on a life of its own, as though the silence that followed rewrote its meaning. In the end, the post has become more than just text. It's a riddle, a warning, and perhaps a ghost. By now, the mystery had become bigger than the man himself. The internet turned his absence into something symbolic, almost mythological. His last post was no longer just a comment. It was treated like scripture, studied and debated as though every word carried hidden meaning. And maybe that's the strangest part. The words themselves were painfully ordinary. It was the silence that followed that gave them power. When people read them today, they don't see a casual remark. They see the weight of finality. Every sentence feels heavier, as though it's a message meant to outlast him. But was that meaning really there? Or was it created by those who came after, projecting their fears into the empty space he left behind? That question has fueled years of speculation, dividing online communities into camps. One side insists he vanished by choice, that he simply cut himself off from the digital world, tired of the noise, unwilling to be found. They see him as a ghost by design, someone who wrote his own ending and disappeared on his own terms. Others argue that no one disappears so completely without help or harm. To them, the lack of real-world evidence isn't proof of freedom, but of something darker. This split has only made the story more powerful. Because whichever side you believe, the same haunting truth remains. He is gone, and no one can explain why. His family, if they ever existed online, has never spoken. His friends from the forum eventually drifted away, unable to solve what became an unsolvable riddle. And yet, new strangers continue to find the post, and each time the cycle begins again. It's this endless loop that makes the case so unsettling. The post becomes a doorway, pulling people in, trapping them in the same unanswered questions that consumed those before them. And the longer you look at it, the harder it is to let go. That's the genius, or the horror, of his silence. It turns ordinary people into detectives, and then into believers in something they can't quite name. Perhaps the most frightening thought is this: what if he isn't unique? What if there are countless other usernames frozen in time? Countless other last posts scattered across the internet, each one marking the place where someone quietly slipped away. How many more ghosts are hiding in the archives, waiting to be discovered? The story of his disappearance is more than a mystery. It's a reminder that in the digital age, vanishing is both impossible and terrifyingly easy. The strangest detail is that the internet never truly forgets, but it also never truly remembers. His last post exists, yes, but stripped of its living context. The conversations around it have crumbled, threads broken, usernames deleted, archives corrupted. What remains is a fragment, like finding a single page of a book without knowing the story it belonged to. And somehow that fragment feels more haunting than the whole. Investigators, both amateur and professional, have tried to attach a real identity to him. Search after search has been conducted, databases combed, missing person reports cross-referenced. Each attempt ends the same way, in nothing. He remains untethered to the physical world, his presence confined entirely to that digital ghost. It's almost as though he never existed beyond the screen. This is where the story crosses into the truly unnerving. Because if he could vanish so completely, what does that mean for the rest of us? We imagine our online lives are permanent, etched into servers and hard drives forever. But his disappearance suggests the opposite, that it takes only one moment of silence, one break in connection, for a person to dissolve into obscurity. And so the theories grow darker. Some claim he was erased intentionally, not by his own hand, but by someone else. A cover-up, a silencing, a digital purge so thorough it wiped him from every corner of the web. The idea sounds like conspiracy, yet the complete absence of evidence makes it feel disturbingly plausible. Others cling to a more chilling belief, that he wanted us to feel this way, that he planted his final post like bait, a lure to make strangers obsess over a mystery that never had an answer. Whichever truth you lean toward, the effect is undeniable. His story lingers not because of what he wrote, but because of what he didn't. The absence, the silence, is the loudest part of it. And in that silence, people hear whatever terrifies them most: abduction, death, erasure, or deliberate disappearance. Years later, the final post still waits. Anyone can read it. Anyone can fall into its shadow. It's not dramatic. It's not alarming. And that is why it chills more deeply than any horror story could. Because behind those words lies the unspoken truth. Somewhere, at some moment, a life ended, whether by choice or by force, and the internet became its tomb. The unanswered question remains: did he vanish from the world, or only from our view? The comment, the profile, the sudden silence, it all feels like pieces of a puzzle that refuse to fit together. Over the years, theories have multiplied. Some argue that the person behind the post was never in danger at all, that it was nothing more than a disturbing joke that took on a life of its own. Others believe the words were a desperate cry for help, one that went unanswered until it was too late. And then there are those who think something much darker happened, that the internet witnessed a farewell hidden in plain sight. But here's the unsettling part. We may never know. Digital footprints fade, records vanish, and what remains are fragments, screenshots, reposts, echoes of a voice that spoke once and then disappeared. That's why stories like this continue to haunt us, because they force us to ask whether the internet really remembers, or whether it quietly buries its ghosts. If you've stayed with me this far, I want to know your thoughts. Do you think the comment was a random act of trolling, a final goodbye, or something far more sinister? Drop your theories below. I read them all, and your perspective might just unlock another piece of this mystery. And if this case gripped you the way it gripped me, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Black Thread Mysteries, and ring the bell so you never miss another chilling story. Because out here in the dark corners of the web, there are always more shadows waiting to be uncovered.